everybody, Charles Howard here, and today I'm going to continue in my series talking about investment with the goal to try and explain to you why it's so important that you start your investing journey and get into investing. And in order to explain why this is so important for you, I'm going to tell you this hidden secret about money, and I'm going to explain some concepts about the way that money works, which is linked to money supplies, which is then linked to inflation, and why investing is really critical for your future, the future of your family. And so I'm going to take you through those topics today. So I'm going to start to explain a really basic concept, but effectively, most people in this world are trading their time, and we all have a finite amount of time on this planet. So we're trading hours of our life for money by working or doing some kind of trade. And when we earn that money, actually the system around us is set up to quietly steal this from us. And most people don't realize this. All of you will know about this thing called inflation, right? And so what's very, very strange about inflation is it's actually a false system that's actually set up by the government and by the way our economies are built. And it's not actually a natural phenomenon. So there's an amazing book that I'm going to put a link in the description, but go and check it out if you're interested in this topic, called The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. And in that book, he explains that the natural way of the world is that all of us are putting our brain power together. We're developing new technologies, and we are actually making things cheaper and more productive every day. So 200 years ago, we used to farm by hand. We then made plows pulled by horses, which were much more efficient, so we could produce more food. And then we made combine harvesters, and then we invented fertilizers. And the whole world is actually becoming more productive, and our technologies are making us be able to deliver more for less. So that is what we call is a deflationary effect. What that should do is over time, with these new technologies, the price of everything should be going down. Now, all of you who have been to the supermarket over the past years will know that the opposite is happening. Actually, what's happening is that the price of things are going up over the time, but that doesn't make sense. If technology and all of the effort of humankind is reducing the cost, improving productivity, why is it that things are getting expensive? Well, first you need to understand the concept of currency and how money works. So you need to understand this thing about fiat currency. So all money that we think of today, whether it's dollars, euros, pounds, yen, these are all currencies which are basically made and issued by central banks and governments. And so a fiat currency is a type of money that is not backed by any physical commodity like a gold or silver. In the past, currencies were backed by gold. You could trade, a note of currency, and it would represent a certain amount of physical gold, for example. That stopped a number of years ago, and now fiat currencies are basically deriving their value from the trust that we all have in the government or the bank that's issuing it. So there's nothing backing currencies. And unfortunately, due to really human nature and the way governments work, this sets up a really perverse incentive system. And this is the driver for inflation. And this is the thing which kind of corrupts our financial system. Instead of things getting cheaper over time, things get more expensive. And now let me explain a chart to you in a really important concept. So I'm going to take you through and show you something called M2 money supply. So what I've got here on the screen is a measure of the US M2 money supply. And let me just go back in time. Let me go back to the start of the data. So in the 1960s. And what M2 is M2 is a measure of the total liquidity in an economy. And so this is kind of all of the cash, money in checkings accounts, savings accounts. So it's all currency which is liquid or near liquid. And so this basically measures the amount of money in the system, okay? And what you can see is that back in the 60s, there was about $200-300 billion of liquidity in the US financial system, in the economy. Okay, and over time, this has gone up in an almost exponential fashion to where we are today at $21.5 trillion of liquidity in this M2 money supply. And if I just measure that on a percentage basis, that is a 6,300% increase in the amount of money in the system. So this is a shocking increase that you see here. And what you can also see is that in the year 2000, this really hockey sticked upwards. And this was due to all the money printing that the governments did during the COVID crisis. So if you imagine that the amount of money is being injected into the system, this basically causes inflation. And so the reason that you have less buying power is because of this M2 money supply. And this money is created by the central banks by typing in a computer and just increasing the amount of liquidity in the system. And so let me put it into a more near-term context. So let's look, because we're talking about investing, and you should really be thinking in kind of 10-year time frame. So if we expand this out, let me zoom down. So we look from 2015 through to today, and let's just measure what's happened over this 10-year period. So we go from Jan 2015, we go up to today, and this is in US dollars, it's the US economy. And so what we see is that the M2 money supply has increased by 81%. So that means that of all of the dollars that were ever in circulation, those have been increased by 80% in the last 10 years. And that's a really mind-blowing impact. And what happens is there's a slight lag, but this drives inflation. So this is why you can buy less every year with the money that you've got. One way of thinking about it is something called like the half-life of the dollar. The half-life is the amount of time it takes for the dollar to have half of its kind of buying power. And the half-life of the dollar, the euro, the pound is all approximately 10 years, meaning if you have $100 and 10 years later, you can buy $50 worth of goods in equivalent terms. And this kind of melting away of the value, which is driven by the governments, is really a stealth tax on all of us. And so if you're not earning returns which are beating this deflation, you're actually going backwards. And so that means that if you spent a day working 10 years ago and you earned $100 for your time, and then you try to save that money, unless you're earning a reasonably significant interest on that money, that time that you spent is effectively being devalued away by the government. And the reason that this happens is that the governments fully understand what's happening here. And what they're doing is they're trying to debase the currency. And one of the reasons is that governments are spending, they're generating debt, and they can't repay those debts. So what they want to do is they want to shrink the debt effectively by devaluing the size of it. So that's a kind of a very nefarious point to understand here. And look, this is the US economy, but how about other economies in the world? Well, let's have a look. So if we have a look at the euro, so this is the euro area from the European Central Bank. Let's go 2015 through to now. That's had about a 61% increase over the last 10 years. How about the British pound? Same thing. We've got about 49, let's call it 50%. So all of these currencies are being devalued. They're all seeing this same money printing effect. It's driving inflation. It's effectively taking money out of your pocket. And so what I want to press home to you during this video is to explain why it's so important that you act now to make sure that you put your money and your wealth that you have available into investments which will earn a return, which is at least outperforming inflation. And the rule of thumb that I would use is that you need to be earning something in the order of 10+% on your investments, otherwise you're going backwards. And 10%, why so high? Well, inflation is raising somewhere between 3 to 5 to 8%, and it varies, right? And the problem is that the inflation numbers are underreported by governments because they don't want to show high inflation numbers, because a lot of things like salaries and pensions are indexed to it. So they purposely show lower numbers, but the buying power is going down about that amount. But keep in mind that if you earn interest on your investments, you're also paying tax on the profit. So after tax, say you earn 10%, in 1 year on your investments, you get taxed by 20-30% on that potentially, and that cuts the return again, and then you're trying to outpace inflation. Now, the good news is that if you're earning returns that are more than that, then compounded interest kicks in, and the compound interest will start to accelerate your wealth. So I hope this video was interesting. I hope the concepts make sense. But in essence, act now, make sure you're investing. Don't let this money printing and the debasement of currencies steal your time and effort that you put in and your hard work it took you to earn your money. If you like the content, you want to learn more, hit the subscribe button. Please comment down below if you have any thoughts to share, any more questions or any other topics that I can cover in the future, and I hope to see you all soon.